On this episode of the podcast, I have with me Rebecca Price. She is partner at Primary Venture Partners. We're going to be talking about the transition of founders to becoming exceptional CEOs. We're going to be talking about ways they succeed and fail, because I think we have to look at both sides of the coin. We're going to see what are those skills, what are those gaps, what are we missing? And also, when we do find somebody who's made that transition, obviously not by accident, there was something there that they actually focused on, developed, and we're going to tap into Rebecca's knowledge and hopefully understand this a little bit better. Excited to have you on the show. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. Before we start, please tell everyone what you guys do at Primary Venture Partners.
Primary Venture Partners is a New York City-based VC firm. We invest in pre-seed and seed stage companies. So we are the first institutional capital a founding team would get. Our investing team focuses in verticals. So we specialize in fintech, healthcare, supply chain, AI infrastructure, go-to-market, and built world.
Awesome.
I think, I would say, just add one more thing. I think something that differentiates Primary from other VC firms is we have a 2-to-1 ratio of operators for investors. So we have a whole team of investors who are doing what most people know VCs do, meeting founders, making investment decisions and writing checks and helping those companies scale. The other 2/3 of the team, that's where I sit, we are all former operators brought into the firm to help hedge and accelerate a company's success to raising a Series A, raising a Series B. And we're organized around all the things that we know early stage companies need: access to first talent, access to first customers, and access to downstream capital. So we have a finance team, we have a go-to-market team, and we have a people and talent team. That people and talent team is the team that I lead, all deployed around helping you hire your first team, helping you organize those people for high performance, and then helping founders on the journey from founder to CEO.
Absolutely. It's interesting because this topic, the transition from a founder to either a successful or less than successful CEO role, there's a difference. And I think, you mentioned 2-to-1 operator to investor ratio. It's obviously super vital that you guys support the founder to make that journey. Maybe before we even start, let's talk about why are we even separating out the notion of founder and CEO? What some people might be listening going, well, I see a lot of people saying founder and CEO in the title. But in your view, is there a difference between a founder and a CEO?
Yes, absolutely. So you do often see someone with the title founder and CEO. However, you also see people out there with title of CEO where they weren't the founder. And what a founder to me is someone who is building 0 to 1. They are discovering something. They're seeing a white space. They're looking into a market and saying this market would be better if it had this product, or the world would be better if this existed. And so they are designing the 0 to 1, literally in like today's modern inventors. That's what I think a founder is. And the skills to be a great founder is you have to be really excellent at sales, because you are selling investors that this is a great company for them to invest in. You are selling your first customer that, hey, we've never existed before, but here's why you should start using our product. And you're selling employees as, hey, we're starting from the beginning. I know we don't maybe have a brand yet, but you should take a leap of faith and come work for us because what we're building is great. So that's all about selling. That's that 0 to 1. What I think about CEO, a CEO is, I define it in 3 ways. MVP. So that an MVP CEO is you are focused on or responsible for money, vision, and people. Money, make sure there's enough money in the bank. So in the early days, that's all about investors and having enough capital, but also it's about revenue and top line growth. The V, vision. As a CEO, you're going to have experts and individual contributors and managers really on the front lines of the work. But you need to be consistently setting that vision, reiterating that vision, aligning people on that vision, galvanizing energy for people to be really engaged in that vision. So there is this loop that a CEO is always doing about stating, aligning, and realigning against the vision. And then people, making sure you're recruiting the best people, you're managing them to performance, You're focusing on organizing people against the most high priority work. You're giving them feedback. You're re-recruiting people to be re-engaged. So that's like both really important in scaling companies, but the roles are actually quite different.
I guess, something maybe that you can expand on, I think it'd be interesting is, you guys see a lot of founders, you guys work with a lot of founders. 2-to-1 ratio means the success of the founder is vitally important to primary venture partners, right? Other venture partners, studios, VC, whatever you want to call them, they all have different strategies. You guys have a very interesting strategy that you want to be there to make sure that team customer capital is taken care of and they actually can get and graduate and move forward in their progression. When you work with founders that end up having the attributes to be successful, make that transition from, hey, I'm at the 0-to-1 just with an idea, are there attributes that you have observed that allow them to grow their skill sets?
Yes. Yeah. So at Primary, when we meet a founder, we're looking at two things, both the founder, who they are, what's their story, why are they excellent, and the market, right? Why is this market great? Why is this a great place to be investing our dollars in? And we pass on deals when it's a great founder and we don't love the market. We also have passed on deals when it's a great market and we don't love the founder. So we really look at both, because particularly in the very beginnings and these pre-seed and seed stage companies, there's so many twists and turns that the market continues to evolve, the product continues to evolve as they get their first customers and find product market fit and get scale. But the human being, that founder, who are they? Are they really going to be able to adapt and respond and lead? Is something we really look at. So I see 5 attributes in successful founders, and I'll give you the headlines and we can dig in if that's what you're interested in taking this conversation. So the first is around adaptability. The second is around leadership and being able to work through others. The third is around discipline. The fourth is around personal grounding. And the fifth is around storytelling, or some of that salesmanship that I was mentioning earlier.
That's interesting, because I think, as you were talking about the attributes and the difference between founder and CEO, I'm starting to hear now some consistencies of things that a founder has to have to be able to progress down that journey. Because obviously, if they're missing some of these, they're going to have some bottlenecks. When you're looking at the investment process and you're looking at, and I know you're not responsible for the investment, you're on the operator side. I understand that. When you do meet with a founder and you start engaging and you're trying to help and you're trying to assess these 5 attributes, are they coachable attributes? Are they attributes that are just sometimes natural born? Because I think sometimes we think founders are just naturally born with some of these things, and and I guess because we see the ones in the media, they exhibit a lot of these characteristic traits. Mm-hmm. Can a founder work on these, or are these, hey, you either have them or you don't have them?
Yeah, it's a great question that, I still feel like I'm a student of this as well. And I ask this question to people I've worked with, really experienced VCs. I ask really experienced coaches who've seen some of the greatest of the great founders, of Silicon Valley and the big tech giants. My experience has been that you have to be coachable. I think that's the adaptability. You have to be coachable. And I do think people can move. However, I asked one of Silicon Valley's greatest coaches this question, Rich Hadberg. You should look him up. He's done incredible coaching work and writes really interesting things. He's coached over 2,000 founders. He would say, from all his data, that people can move only 3 points. And so I think that's just an interesting data point. I'm curious if your audience would agree with that or disagree with that, but that's what he would say, 3 points. And so I do think people come in with natural gifts. And I do think people come in with, some level of self-awareness, EQ, and some level of coachability and learning. And I think if you spike in those areas, I think you can move more. But you have to come. So adaptability, one of the adaptability characteristics is about high EQ, the ability to adjust your behavior. Another part about adaptability is just being a learning machine, constantly looking to improve yourself and improve the company. The third piece of adaptability is being open-minded to receive input and disagreement. So if you're low on adaptability, then I think it's going to be really hard to grow and learn in the other areas. But I think if you're more highly adaptable, then I think you probably have more ability to be coached in some of the things like salesmanship, which is your kind of ability to like be credible and sell a vision, sell a story.
Interesting. Yeah, no, obviously, yeah, I think there's, people have the ability to change. Obviously, Rich Hackberg's, they can adjust 3. Yeah. That's very interesting because I think, and I'm starting to think about myself as you're talking about that. I'm like, oh, what is it that I would work on? Are there 3? And if you ask my wife, there'd be more than 3. We won't ask her. Yeah. But no, that's really interesting because I think, as I'm listening and I'm hearing the conversation about the success criteria, I can see some of that adaptability. Leadership can be learned, right? Obviously, there's things that we can learn. Storytelling. I mean, these are things that we can work on. I mean, I do believe people can excel and work on their weaknesses. When you do see a founder, do you ever view a founder and go, I can already anticipate some of these as challenges to becoming a more well-rounded or exceptional CEO down the road? Are there things that start standing out?
I think that's storytelling. Salesmanship, which is kind of credibility, charisma, salesmanship, intelligence, competitive drive. You can see that right out of the gates. With the way they pitch, the way they respond to questions, the way they adapt the conversation based on who they're talking to. I think you can really see that. And sometimes, like, I actually was having a conversation with a founder a couple of weeks ago where immediately I could tell they were really smart, really passionate about the space, very well networked, well versed, but they were so in the weeds. Immediately they were talking to me, someone who's a people and talent person, and they were immediately going into tons of minutia about data, the specific code they were writing, the tech stack of that they were. It was just, to me, that was like a lack of adaptability in storytelling, because why in the first 5 minutes of a conversation with the chief people officer, a person who runs people and talent for a firm, are you kind of really going into something technical versus kind of that self-awareness? So I'm going to step way back. I'm going to tell you the big vision of like, here's what we're building, here's who we're building it for, and here's how it's different. And then kind of adapting to the audience, guiding me through where I want to take the conversation, and then adapting to where my energy was going. Now, are they coachable? Potentially, like if we had given them feedback and we had done a take 2, could they have been coachable? Absolutely. I also don't know how much coaching they'd gotten coming in, if that was a coached up version or not. But kind of immediately I was like, I wonder how self-aware this person is, how adaptable they are, and the precision that they have around their salesmanship.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely art, not science. I don't think evaluating any of this stuff is, that is something that people can do easily. It's hard. You're trying to make decisions. I guess from the standpoint of, are there ways that founders, we talked about, like, hey, how can somebody work on those attributes? Are there any ways that are kind of, hey, these are definite, or these are ways that you fail at that CEO or becoming a more exceptional or well-rounded or somebody that excels? Are there clear ways that people would potentially identify?
Yes. And so my point of view, and I know when I've shared this with other people, they add on. So my point of view, there'll be 3 ways I see founders fail on their journey from founder to CEO. The first is in that attribute that I call personal grounding, which is that self-awareness, right? Before you can create an us, you have to really know thyself. I say, who are you? What do you value? How do you make decisions? How do you show up when you're under stress? Why are you in the work that you're doing? When have you been on the best team? And what about that best team? What role did you play? How did you show up? And the opposite, when your sort of worst team, not maybe the worst performing team, but when you were your worst version of yourself, what was true about that team? What was true about those partnerships? Because if you don't know that about yourself already, and you now are taking in capital and hiring a team and trying to organize humans to perform in alignment towards execution or a goal. If you lack a self-awareness to know the type of leader you are, the type of person you are, the way that you're the most successful, I believe you will fail in really harnessing the best of the group. And in the end, I do think organizations become the embodiment of the leader. And I think through human psychology, organizations take on the dynamics of their leaders. If the leaders have certain values, the group tends to take on those values, particularly when it's a group that people see more in like Maslow's hierarchy of survival, where you need your job to survive. I guess we're going to kind of put in those kind of terms, and people want to do well. They're ingratiating themselves with the leader. They're conforming to the group to do well. Then that group will take on the attributes of the leader. And so there's a failure there if you don't already start from a place of honesty about who you are. And so from there, I would ask a question of like, what's some critical feedback that you've gotten that maybe caught you by surprise? And what adjustments have you made since then? Or like a time where you had a personal setback and that really affected you, like what happened, right? I would just kind of want to know some ways that people are able to reflect on those hard times. The second component is about lack of alignment. So one of my favorite business books is called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. And he also wrote the book, 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But he really talks about these first team principles, the first team being the executive team. And that executive team or leadership team serves the company. The leadership team is not like the United Nations or Congress where you represent constituents of your department, but really that leadership team is set up to serve the company. And the CEO's job is to create alignment of that group. What are we focusing on? What are our priorities? How will we measure ourselves? How will we be successful? It's not that marketing will be successful if sales fails, or that customer success can be successful if sales fails or sales succeeds, right? We all have to be successful together. And a leader who can create alignment and clarity and reinforce that alignment and create a team where people can safely, honestly disagree. And they're disagreeing from a place of already trusting each other. They're disagreeing only to create alignment and focus. That is the performance triangle that ultimately gets teams to succeed. And if a CEO is too caught up in the weeds or too focused on shiny objects or constantly shifts priorities or has these shadow organizations where they'll say one thing in front of one group and say another thing in front of another group, or they're not fostering trust, or they're not creating teams that are vulnerable, all these things are ways that teams erode and then aren't ultimately like aligned to perform. So a CEO's job is really to create that alignment, and all those practices I just described. It's the concept of healthy teams. A smart team is where you have all the smartest people in the room. A healthy team is where you have all those smart people really aligned and organized and trusting each other. That is a concept that if you're curious to learn more about, it's all in The Advantage, one of my favorite business books. And it's the first book I would recommend anyone who's going to be leading a team to read. And the third piece that I'll mention about failure is about recruiting. So often recruiting seems like someone else's job. It's something I can outsource. It's a back office job. It's an admin job. It's beneath me. We hear that all the time. And the companies and the leaders that I see them who are the most successful, they are the ones where they are prioritizing recruiting as a critical strategic business driver, just as sales is, right? Just as managing our finances are, just as building our tech stack. Because at the end of the day, I always say every problem is a people problem, right? All we are is like ideas, people, and money, and really getting the best people in. And you're creating a culture where recruiting is a priority, and recruiting is something that is really seen as important. And I worked with a CTO now, and he's the CEO now of a company, but he always made being on an interview panel a privilege. Like you earn the right to be on that interview panel. You earn the right to be able to choose and select who gets to work with us on this team. And if you don't take that seriously, if you don't come prepared, if you run a bad experience, if you're late, you're rude, you don't have your feedback, you're not thoughtful, you get kicked off the panel. You make it a privilege that people like earn their way into it. And that is the type of company that will ultimately, I think, have the best people, because people feel ownership in making those hiring decisions, and they're not just trying to outsource it to a stranger. No one can recruit better than your team. No one can tell your story better than you. And employees want to know who they're going to work with. And when we put so much time, money, energy into a go-to-market strategy, the marketing, who we're going out to, who are the right personas, moving them into our funnel and converting them. Recruiting is the exact same thing. You are selling your company as a great place to work. And you need to really have a good understanding of who are the people who do the best here. What types of people perform well on our team? Where are they? What jobs do they have now? What values do they have? And how are we going to be able to pull them into our company? And that's not something that I believe you can outsource.
I mean, I love that. I actually I was taking some notes because I was like, I need to link to the book, because I was like, I don't actually think I listen to books. I don't read books. So when I say read books, I feel like I'm not being truthful, but I got to listen to that Audible, and I'm gonna link it into the show notes because I think that sounds very valuable. I was thinking back to the 5 successful attributes you outlined, and I was thinking about lack of alignment, and I was thinking about know thyself. The aspect of recruiting is a privilege. The top talent. I can see, even though you listed 5 successful, I can see how those dotted line in their own ways to mapping to the 3 failures. They're not 1-to-1. You can see how little bits and pieces of each of those, because I could see lack of alignment is that grounding, a little bit of discipline, a little bit of leadership. I mean, that storytelling all fit, and
Yes.
it's
correct.
Way more complicated than if you listed 3 ways to fail, but there's a lot of permutations of how to take those 5 to actually succeed. Fantastic, by the way. I appreciate the overview. I guess final question, because I know you got to get back to actually doing your job. When you're looking at people and you're looking down in terms of the future, obviously you're trying to see these attributes, where potentially people can fail. Coaching is hard because you have people that are driven and they're trying to do things and they're very focused on being successful. How do you convey these 3 things that you mentioned, these 3 ways that people, how do you help convey that to a founder so that they're self-aware that those 5 attributes dotted line into these 3, and they need to understand that that's not going to help their company?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, I mean, first of all, it's like any relationship. The person has to be intrinsically motivated to want this outcome. So that's number one. I can only, it's like any teacher, you can only teach so much, but if the person isn't driven or motivated to get there, then there's already going to be some challenges. And then the second is really understanding how people learn. Like, some people really motivated or learn through example. So if I'm working with someone like that, I'm like, let me inspire you through who I've seen do this, because I've never been a founder. I've never been a CEO. So I have, total respect and empathy for how hard that job is. But there is a world where you can help founders see successful, or see or talk to successful CEOs and say, this is how they got there. So that's one thing. The second type of persona is someone who has to learn by trial and error. It's only like through a mistake will then they'd be like, oh, that didn't work. I'm going to go seek something else to do different. So sometimes, I've more when I've been a chief people officer inside startups, have I realized I will influence the best that I can, but I'll also know that I'll gain the most credibility to influence that founder after only they've stumbled, And then the third is kind of a permutation of those first 2, which is the person who just has experience and they've maybe been really happy in some of their successful experiences or disappointed in some of their failures. So they're also really more eager and open to speak with experts, be surrounded by people who are multiple steps ahead. And that's why I put that into like the learning machine. They're constantly looking to improve themselves and they know from their past experience that they need that help.
Awesome. We got a lot of great insights and advice. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we didn't exhaust the topic. There's probably deeper areas we have to dove into. We try to cover what we can in the 30 minutes, and you're fantastic. If somebody's going to want to connect with you to pick your brain on leadership, founders, the transition to CEO, what is a good way of potentially connecting with you?
Yeah, I try to post a bunch of learnings and articles through LinkedIn. So I think that's a great place to start. You can find me on LinkedIn, Rebecca Price, partner at Primary. And from there, we could connect through LinkedIn Messenger.
Okay, awesome. Definitely appreciate it. Thank you for your time. We'll put that, obviously, your LinkedIn URL in the show notes so people can do that. But I really do appreciate your time. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for covering the topic.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. That's it for the episode. Be back again, different guest, different topic. Until then, two things. One, I think we kind of highlighted, Rebecca did, I didn't, Rebecca did, about founders' attributes that lead to success, that typically sees issues that lead to failure, how, there's 5 successful attributes, potentially, maybe more, but the ones we covered. And there's 3 main areas that we identified. And that mapping is not as clear. And I think this is a great conversation. So hopefully share it with somebody else who is interested in leadership, founders, that transition from founder to CEO, or just from technical leadership to CEO role. I think a lot of interesting points in here that Rebecca made. So please share the episode with other people. Also, like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how the podcast is doing for you. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.